Good morning, everyone. We got a little bit of a special episode of Slow Burn here today. As you can probably hear, there's a lot of birds, and that's for good reason. This is our first sunrise episode. That's right, it is about 6:16 in the morning. We have been up since 4. Took my wife to the airport for work and came back and got this all set up and ready to go. We waited a little bit to start for the light to kind of settle in so you could see it was sunrise. And now we are here. Sun is set to rise at 6:27, so I thought 10 minutes before would just be perfect. But the birds are out and about. That is no doubt. Well, today I wanted to share a story and then read a quick passage from the Two Towers per request of someone in the comments on the last video. Maybe it was actually on the post about the Inklings. I don't remember exactly where the comment was, but nonetheless, someone requested a read, so we're going to do that and tell you guys a bit of a story. Well, let's start with what we're smoking. Smoking out of my Cherrywood McQueen Ranger, and in it I got some Capstan Blue. Figured if we were going to be reading Tolkien, it's only proper that we smoke one of his favorite blends out of a Aragorn inspired pipe. It's been a while since I smoked this blend. When I first started smoking pipes, I smoked it all the time. But then I decided I wanted to slow down on it and use it for special occasions, because it's a harder blend to find, and when you do find it, it's expensive. So Capstan Blue became a bit of a special occasion blend. So that being said, it's been a while since I've smoked Virginia. Or straight Virginia, I should say. The last episode we did the review on the Inklings. I think in the past few episodes of that, we were smoking either My Mixture 965 or Nightcap, 2 English blends. And Inklings is a Balkan blend. It's very smoky, Latakia forward on the English blends and very Oriental forward on the Balkan. So this blend is a very nice change of pace. When you open the tin, and in my case the mason jar, it smells like fig Newtons. Straight fig, maybe some spiced raisin, but very fruity nonetheless. But when you burn it, it reveals a different side of itself. It's very cocoa. Maybe a subtle note of fig on a nice hot chocolate. Some HEB black coffee, the espresso whole bean. Very nice. It's a good balance to this. When you're drinking something like black coffee, the sweetness really shines on something like this. So, I'm very happy about this one. It's a beautiful morning. Slight breeze. Still a little muggy outside. It is June in Texas, so this is about the best you can ask for unless there's some anomaly going on. But I will say it's been a very wet June here. Lots of storms. I think that's why it's been so humid. And my dog wrestling around inside. He wants to be outside. But the other day we saw some coyotes running around this time in the morning. And since I'm going to be focused on this and not on my surroundings, I don't really want him out here wandering about. But let's dive into what we wanted to talk about anyway. Slow burn after all. And in honor of this pipe, I thought it only appropriate that I share a bit of a story. A story about redemption. A story about forgiveness. A story about how something as simple as a tobacco pipe can rekindle a fire between families. A good fire. For those of you who know, I became a Christian in December of 22 in Colorado, Breckenridge. I don't know if there was a defining moment or if it was a bunch of little moments that just accumulated all at that trip. The latter's more likely. But before then, I was a bit of a knucklehead, I would say. I was not very trustworthy. I was very self-centered, emotionally focused, spiritual is what I would claim to be. So it's just really worshiping myself and pulling from a bunch of different religions of things I'd consider good with no true basis of morality. And I was just kind of living my life, minding my own business, doing my own thing. Not bothering anybody, but definitely not helping anybody either. And during that time of my life, I lived with a family of a friend and was kind of a freeloader, to be honest, for a while. I didn't have a job. We had just moved back from California, where we had purchased a RV. And the purchase of the RV came about in a very interesting way, and that's where the story begins, really. I drove a 2015, I want to say, a 2015 Mustang. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was a ingot silver Mustang. Black rims, black stripe on the sides, not the two down the middle, but I drove that and kind of, didn't take care of it, which if it's a Ford, you're going to pay the price for that, but I really never did. And when I moved back from California, I was like, okay, I'm going to sell the Mustang and I'm going to buy an RV. Well, I was bouncing around Facebook Marketplace looking for an RV, and I found one. It was very nice. 1987 Toyota Blue Marlin, which is really just a third-party camper thrown on the back of a Tacoma, I believe. So, it's a Toyota engine. Figured it'd last a lifetime. And it did. But here's the catch. I had not sold the Mustang. So what did I do? I went to my pawpaw's house. And I bring up this story because I'm going today to my pawpaw's house. going to go visit him in Palestine, Texas. But this was 4 or 5 years ago. I went to go visit him. And I had ulterior motives. Maybe not conscious ulterior motives. But I knew that he was one to help people financially. Again, not necessarily conscious or nefarious or malicious, but it was still ever present in the back of my mind nonetheless. So I went to go visit him, showed him the RV, and it wasn't in my mind that he would straight up front the money, but that is what he ended up doing. You know, oh, I'm going to buy this RV. Oh, and then he offered to pay for it until I sold the Mustang. Well, he fronted me a little less than 10 grand. I won't go into the exact amount, but he did it nonetheless. And the next day we go to Denton, Texas, buy the RV, and take it back. The first night we stay in the RV, we get super sick. Like, very sick. And to find out it is littered with mold that the owner had painted over. So, if you have any advice to take from me, it's don't rush into purchases. Take your time. Especially don't get fronted money to rush into a purchase, and here's why. A few weeks later, I end up selling the Mustang. I told my papa, hey, I got your money. Let's, let me pay you. And he said, hold on to that money for a few weeks. I'm going to be up in the Dallas area, and I'll come and get it from you. Okay. That I bet you that was spiritual at the time. Previously atheist, probably at this time a little bit more spiritual. I had dabbled in some psychedelics and found that there was more meaning to life beyond the surface, and therefore if there was meaning to life, there was some kind of spirituality going on. But nonetheless, I was very, very selfish. And so during this couple-week period that he had me hold on to the money, I ended up spending all the money. Maybe it was a test. And if that's the case, then maybe I certainly failed. Because it came around a couple weeks later, he said, hey, I'm in the area, let me come get the money. And I wasn't conscious that I'd spent it all, so I opened up the bank account to go in and pull it out. And 95% of it was washed away. Money goes away quickly when you're stoned all the time and funding your stonage and funding the munchies and funding a load of other things like fixing up an RV. So that time came and I had to say, hey, I do not have the money. And I would say our relationship forever changed in that moment because he had done me a favor and I had broken his trust. Now, I hate telling this story. I hate looking at myself in the mirror and knowing that I'm the type of person who would do something like this. But since becoming a Christian, I recognize that we all are. And me most especially. This is not the only time I wronged someone. This is not the only time I broke somebody's trust. But it was definitely the straw that broke the camel's back because I became depressed. I became shameful. I became full of guilt and remorse for my actions that I knew I needed to change. So maybe this is when the veil began to be lifted. But this is definitely the time where I felt most broken and knew that I had relied on myself and it took me nowhere. It actually took me further down than I had been before. So the neighbor called and gave me this story. I said, how can something like a tobacco pipe change? Well, eventually I paid it back. I got a job. It got me off my butt and helped me not be a freeloader, and there were some other instances in my life that I will not share at the moment that also led to that. That happened on the same day, actually. But basically, I got kicked in the butt that day and realized I am nothing but a joke. The person I think I am and the person I was were not the same person at all. So I got a job. And I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked. I actually worked at a movie theater in Highland Park, Texas, called the Highland Park Village Theater. To this day, that might be my favorite job I ever had. And I moved up quickly. I became a very hard worker. So I get into modes. When I'm in work mode, I'm working. But when I'm not in work mode, it's very hard for me to get motivated. So, I worked and worked, and eventually, he'd check in a lot. He'd come in, and I'd tell him I was working, and he'd show up to where I was working, see if I really was. I can't blame him. Looking back, how could you trust the word of a liar? Trust the word of someone who broke your trust. So, whenever I got the money, this time I didn't have him come out to me. I said, I'm not waiting. I can't trust myself with this. Let me take this money all the way to Palestine. And so I did. Put it in a folder, set it aside, and took it all back up and paid it back. He wasn't even there. It was my Grammy, his wife, that I gave it to. And I couldn't even express my deepest regrets about it until very much later. I say always, now I'm married, so it's every other year, but typically I go to that side of the family's house for Thanksgiving, and that next Thanksgiving I went. And we cried, or I did. But it was a very emotional conversation. I told him I felt I had marred the relationship, and really just took for granted everything he had done for me up to that point and in my life. And that broke my heart, and I think it really did break his. But he was a Christian at that time, regardless of me not being a Christian. And he forgave me. Now, by my own designs and maybe in my own mind, I felt like it took many years to really heal that wound. And maybe in some ways it will never fully be healed. But I can tell you one thing. Our relationship has vastly changed. A couple years after that, he had a heart attack. And I was scared that I was going to lose him. I called and found out he was doing okay, and we talked. But that was right after I had become a Christian, or maybe right before. I think it was right after that he had that heart attack. And I knew I wanted things to change. In my adult life, I hadn't visited that side of the family very often, except for holidays. And since coming to Christ, I recognized the importance of family, the importance of legacy, the importance of history. And so I wanted to rekindle that a bit. And that's where this comes into play. A few months ago, I went out there to visit him right around the time I was getting into pipe smoking, unbeknownst to him. But we were having a conversation in his living room, and I just kind of mentioned it in passing. His eyes lit up. He'd been having some vertigo issues, just having to sit down a lot because of it. And he was like, what in the world? You know, since I haven't been able to do much, I got into pipe smoking a bit. And I was like, what? So we quickly nerded out together about different pipes, our love for C.S. Lewis, which is really what C.S. Lewis is the one that sparked my interest in pipe smoking. Tolkien kind of came a bit later. Through the interest in Lewis. And so we nerded out about that, and then nerded out about pipes, and I told him that I had just got this. And after some research, I don't know if you're all like me, but when you hyperfixate on something, you research it a lot. So after I bought this, I researched it, and I was like, oh man, I shouldn't have got the cherry wood. It's not as good of a wood for pipe smoking as briar wood. So when I told him about this, I was like, if you get one, make sure you get the briar. And he did. He got the Briar McQueen Ranger. I think he got the forged finish also, because that's what this is. Yes, he did get the forged finish. And today I'll be bringing some 3 nuns up there, so we can share in the blend that C.S. Lewis smoked. Although this version of 3 Nuns has the dark-fired Kentucky and not Perique. Still a good blend though, I might say. I like that blend. So, all that to say, we've been talking more than ever. So I had to go out and see him again. This will be the first time going out there that we get to smoke our pipes together today. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the conversation. We both share a lot of scripture that we read with one another, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that opens up, and just getting to spend time with him. Last time I went, I just went up for the day, but today I'll be staying the night up there. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully my Grammy will be there. She's a big Toy Story fan, and Toy Story 5 just came out, and I went and saw it. Which I have my concerns about the movie, but overall, it was good. How could you not have concerns? It's a Disney movie, people. Let's use wisdom. But, speaking of Disney, and haters of Disney, let's read some Tolkien, who's famously not a fan of Disney. But I want to read this because I think it has some connection to the conversation. This is the Two Towers. This is a passage from the chapter The Window on the West. And I bring up this passage because oftentimes we have in the back of our minds desires that we don't speak of, or things that we're hiding that leak. Heart posture leaks. ulterior motives leak. And if you're not aware of those things, they can bleed into other aspects of life. Which is why it's important to confess. That's why it's important to pray. That's why it's important to align yourself to the frequency of Scripture and not to the frequency of the world. And I thought that this passage was very reminiscent of some times in my life where I had some unspoken things and they leaked. So I'm going to start a little bit of a middle of a paragraph, but they're talking about the Lady of Lorien of Galadriel. And this is Faramir talking. "Then she must be lovely indeed," said Faramir, "perilously fair." "Well, I don't know about perilous," said Sam. "It strikes me that folk take the peril with them into Lorien, and finds it there because they've brought it. But perhaps you could call her perilous because she's so strong in herself. You could dash yourself to pieces on her, like a ship on a rock, or drown yourself like a hobbit in a river. But neither rock nor river would be to blame. Now He stopped and went red in the face. "Yes? Now Boromir, you would say?" said Faramir. "What would you say? He took his peril with him?" "Yes, sir, begging your pardon, and a fine man as your brother was, if I may say so. But you've been warm on the scent all along. Now I watched Boromir and listened to him, from Rivendell all down the road, looking after my master, as you'll understand, and not meaning any harm to Boromir. And it's my opinion that in Lorien he first saw clearly what I guessed sooner, what he wanted. From that moment he first saw it. He wanted the enemy's ring." "Sam!" cried Frodo, aghast. He had fallen deep into his own thoughts for a while, and came out of them suddenly and too late. "Save me," said Sam, turning white and then flushing scarlet. "There I go again. Whenever you open your big mouth, you put your foot in it," said the gaffer used to say to me. "And right enough. Oh dear, oh dear. Now look here, sir," he turned, facing up to Faramir with all the courage that he could muster. "Don't you go taking advantage of my master because his servants know better than a fool. You've spoken very handsome all along, put me off my guard, talking of elves and all, but handsome is as handsome does, we say. Now's the chance to show your quality." "So it seems," said Faramir, slowly and very softly, with a strange smile. "So that is the answer to all the riddles. The one ring that was brought to have perished from the world, and Boromir tried to take it by force. And you escaped and ran all the way to me. And here in the wild I have you, 2 halflings, and a host of men at my call, in the Ring of Rings. A pretty stroke of fortune, a chance for Faramir, Captain of Gondor, to show his quality. Ha!" He stood up, very tall and stern, his gray eyes glinting. Frodo and Sam sprang up from their stools and set themselves side by side with their backs to the wall, fumbling for their sword hilts. There was a silence. All the men in the cave stopped talking and looked toward them in wonder. But Faramir sat down again in his chair and began to laugh quietly, and then suddenly became grave again. I think I'll stop there. For those of you who haven't read it, I don't want to spoil too much about where that conversation goes. And nonetheless, there's a bit of irony within the passage. Sam was talking about how when they went into Lorien and spoke to Galadriel, that Boromir leaked his motives, his wants, his desires. We talked about James 1:13, about how men are led astray by their own desires. It seemed to ring true for Boromir. But something else leaked shortly after that. It was the secret. of the ring that Frodo had not told Faramir about. And Sam, foolishly, by his own account, leaked it, the information. Oh, that's interesting. And it's a good passage. It's a good reminder. I was told that there's a difference between living a private life and a secret life. And when you're in a consistent pattern of sin, as I've been throughout my life, you find yourself living a secret life. But what's interesting is when you don't have that aura of sin around you, you don't have that consistent pattern, there's a freedom in it, a release. And what you end up finding is that you're not living a secret life, but a private one. You're open, you're honest. You also don't feel the need to dispel needless information. Liars often give themselves away by dispelling too much information. Too many details that I wouldn't need to know. And you wouldn't need to tell me unless you were trying to paint a picture. Unless you're trying to force a narrative. Liars often give away themselves without even exposing the lie. It's just the context around the lie. It's a little too detailed. There's typically something else at hand. But privacy is different. You're not dispelling unneeded information, you're just living. And as people want to know, they ask, and you reveal. And if they don't want to know, then you keep it to yourself. And I've learned this over the years, watching people, watching myself mostly. I was not always a very honest person. And there's freedom in honesty. There's freedom ultimately in Christ. And that's what I have found in my life, and that's the only difference from my life before I took advantage of my pawpaw and after, when our relationship has been rekindled. So, that's really all I wanted to share today. I have been reluctant to ever share that story publicly. Mainly because it's a shameful story. It really highlights a piece of myself that I don't like. A piece of my story I'm not proud of. But necessary, I think, today nonetheless. Because I want you guys to know I'm not perfect. Obviously. And even since being a Christian, I've made many mistakes. I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to share those eventually. But for now, let's just keep it with this. I appreciate everyone who watches these. I enjoy making them and just enjoy the slow conversation and the slow burning of a good pipe and a good blend inside the pipe. Something misplaced my tool here. There it is. Let's give it one more spark before I sign it off. Let the birds sing and ring out. I'll probably read one more chapter. I don't know if you can see. I guess I can take this out now. I put it there from my other spot. but I'm pretty close to the end. I have 3 chapters left. Probably about to read one now. Read one tonight when I go to bed. One more in the morning. And then tomorrow night when I get back, I'll start Return of the King. Boy, am I excited. The final chapter, the final step, the final book. Then, it's on to other things, which we will definitely talk about in the future. But until then, I'm Miles Maestro, and this is Slow Burn.